wrong with the wall? Seriously.
Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the regular school committee meeting of Monday, January 8th, 2018. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. Start off tonight with our Around Attleboro update by our Student Advisory Council, Mr. Lancaster.
Hi everybody. Just gonna jump right into it. Going forward into this new year, hopefully, Attleboro Public Schools and SAC have a good fresh start to make strides in bettering the Attleboro Public Schools community. Early release days for the upcoming schools, high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, plus Martin Luther King Day next Monday. PTO meetings. There's an 8th grade faculty basketball game with the ELA Common Assessment 5th through 8th grades at Brennan, and then Brennan has Saturday school, I guess, and then there's advisory for the high school plus the early release day, and then the 25th is an advisory day. There is faculty tours at the high school from 6 to 7:30. Also an ACE-PAC meeting with Jessica Minahan and the Attleboro Public Library. Oh, and the Attleboro Public Library from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then for SAC, what we're doing this year, so we gathered actually at my house. We got some students from our group to gather together, and we pretty much we called around like to the residents of Attleboro High School. I don't know, maybe you guys got a call actually. Pretty much just to get their standpoint on what they were doing for voting for the new high school, and we got a lot of like good data down. We kind of just gathered, had like, it was actually pretty fun. We're planning some more coming in the future. Just to, it's a very easy way for the students of not only of SAC but just anybody that wants to help out with the project to get involved in it. So it's a really good thing to have, kind of just a tool that we can use in any way to get more students involved. We're planning another one. We finished the recycling competition that we had at the last meeting, and sophomores won it. Unfortunately, my grade didn't take the win on that one, but hopefully next time we will. And then the next thing that we were talking about doing was we noticed that sometimes when students speak about Attleboro High School, like mostly to each other and to like their friends and stuff, not necessarily to the teachers and parents, but one of the reasons that some students don't have a lot of school spirit is just because they think that our school is often referred to as a dump, which is not something that I like to hear very often, especially from some of the students that go to class in it, which all of you guys know is not true. It's just some aspects of it are physically unappealing just because of certain cuts that have been made and stuff. So one of the steps that SAC wanted to take to kind of changing that mindset for students was not necessarily make it look nicer, but just kind of like in the spring we were talking about maybe tidying up the courtyard a little bit, because that's not used very much by the students, and I think that we could, if we tidy that up, that would give teachers a reason and the ability to maybe use that for more of their classes, to go outside more, interact with that more, and it's actually a really good area. So that was one of the goals that we have for later in this year when it starts to warm up. But just kind of with that mindset of making it a little bit more appealing and kind of clean up some of the areas of the school that may have been overlooked in the past couple of years. And that's all I got for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Yes, Mrs. Scales.
If you're a student and you're not a member of the SAC, how can you get involved with the campaign if they want to help with the calling?
So the campaign, some students think that it's strictly targeted towards students that are doing like student council or class council or student advisory committee, which is completely not true. They're just the campaign manager, named is Keith Drucker. He's looking just for any students at all, because the students are the real ones that are going to get the word out there. So as many like just any sort of student at all that maybe wants to get involved, that's a good way to branch into, like, if they want to join student council or class council or SAC and they don't know which one to join, it's very easy for them to just maybe, come to like one of the meetings I have at my house, and they can, make some phone calls with us. We have like pizza and stuff out. They can make some friends, and then hopefully from that point on, they can branch into like other things like student council and hopefully become more involved in the future.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lancaster. Moving on to the business agenda for tonight, we have the report of the superintendent. Ms. Sawyer?
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd like to speak briefly about our great weather event from last week that we have all thankfully come out the other side of. I'm excited to see that we're going to be enjoying some warm temperatures later this week. First, I want to start by saying that the type of storm that we had last week is a major event, and to recover from that and to get us ready for school takes a real Herculean effort. And I wanted to thank our facility staff, our partners at Sodexo, and all the people on the city side that helped to deal with the impact of an event like that and allow us to be in a good place to have school today and be ready for students and staff so that we can all be safe. The decision last week was not a difficult one, but the forecast as it wasn't very hard to decide to call off school for Thursday. The decision as for Friday, we needed to weigh the pros and cons of either making the decision early, thus giving families enough time to make accommodations for the cancellation, or rolling the dice and trying to wait longer to find out that we would actually be able to have school on Friday. And based on where we were Thursday afternoon, based on the kind of conditions we were facing, we made the estimated guess that even a delay would not give us the time we needed to make sure that our grounds were clear and that the city's sidewalks would be ready. So that's why we made that decision when we did, and I think when the dust cleared on Friday and we saw what we had made that decision correctly. I think it's important that the community understands that with a storm of that magnitude, when you're talking about removing 14 inches of snow, that takes days to take care of, especially considering the amount of people that we have available to us to do that work. It's really quite a task, and to get the schools prepared is quite an operation. And there are people who worked all weekend long to make that happen. And again, I can't express enough gratitude for that, so that today would be a effective and safe day of school. That being said, the storm did cause a couple issues, and Mr. Furtado was going to brief you on a couple things that happened over the weekend as a result.
Sure. Yeah, just to emphasize what the superintendent just said, when we have a storm of this magnitude, it's not just moving snow out of the way. It's actually finding a different place for the snow. We had front-end loaders, dump trucks doing parking lots. That's a very serious effort, and that doesn't just happen quickly. Very happy to report that the building sustained the storm well. We had a couple of univents, 2 or 3 univents at Coelho Middle School go down, making those rooms not being able to be used for classroom space this week until we can get those motors repaired. We have a significant ice dam at Brennan at the door that the cafeteria workers typically enter in through that we have to deal with. Still, we haven't been able to break that yet. We had fire suppression issues at Brennan. We had a significant leak caused by the temperatures. The space between the ceiling and the roof in the Brennan Middle School and Wampsut Middle School are not heated, and there is piping up there, and so we had a typical pipe burst. And then, not necessarily snow-related, but at the old high school we had some very, very serious problems with internal temperatures because of the windows primarily, but also because of the heating systems. And because of the single-digit temperatures, that building couldn't get much above 60 degrees for 2 solid weeks now. and fortunately, with the break this week, that'll change. Going forward, we're very, very concerned about roofs across the district, and we'll see what happens as the snow melts with the high temperatures, and keep the committee informed if anything significant were to occur.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Furtado? Mrs. Quinn?
Speaking of the roofs, I know we've had quite a go of it at our middle schools. What kind of preventative measures can we put in place, assuming the worst, to try to get out ahead of this as it's coming?
Yeah, we have continued to do work on the roofs, so we've done a lot of sealing around windows and seams this fall, which should result in fewer problems going forward. But as the temperatures rise and the snow starts to melt, we're going to, discover problems. And we have a roofing company that we've been using throughout this process to kind of get us back to the point where we can submit to the MSBA for projects on hand, waiting in case anything were to happen at Brennan or Wamsutta.
And just one point I do want to make is, I happen to live across from the old high school, and I just want to commend Mr. Parinto and the team. Granted, I haven't seen, what it looks like aside from this building and that building, but given the volume of the snow, how clear those sidewalks are, the driveway, the stairs leading, those steep stairs, they work really hard, and they ought to be commended for the efforts that went into it. That building looked like it was ready to go pretty quickly after the storm had come through. So
Yeah,
please pass along my appreciation.
We had our custodial staff, our maintenance staff working through the weekend. We had about a half dozen Sodexo personnel augment our staffs, in addition to the vendors we use for plowing. So it was a significant effort, 12 buildings to get things going for this morning.
Mrs. Sawyer?
I just want to thank the DPW for their hard work. In all my years of being on the school committee, this is the fastest response to cleaning Washington Street I've ever seen, which is making it safe for our students.
I'll speak that new department head over there.
He can't take credit.
Thank you. Good point. Yep. Mrs. Sawyer?
Yeah, so, as Mr. Furtado sort of alluded to, we did benefit from the timing of the storm in that we had the weekend to recover. And I think that's important to note that I'm grateful that we didn't have to worry about whether or not we would be ready for Saturday or not. That certainly made it a little bit more manageable that we had the extra 2 days to clean up, but it would have been a challenge to have school the next day, as it was. And we also faced the coldest temperatures over the weekend, thankfully. There is a point at which that becomes a concern for us as well. So we did have a couple lucky breaks in that regard. The final thing I wanted to say about the storm is that we did have a little bit of trouble with our messaging system, the reverse call that we use. The service is called School Connect, or at least it is for a couple more months. They were recently bought out, so it'll have a new name soon. But we noticed on social media that there were some complaints about not receiving the call. We did do a reverse call. Most people, I think, received that call. But as a result of people notifying us that they did not receive it, we did find a couple issues, couple problems with Aspen, our student information system, and School Connect not talking to each other properly. We also had some people who didn't have in their personal information the right field filled out so that they would get the call. So there were a couple different things that contributed some problems with some of our staff. So these things were all brought to our attention, and as we sit here tonight, we think we've addressed all the concerns so that the next time everyone should receive the call. One of the things that did come up is that I guess now people have software that they use to prevent robocalls at home, and we believe that the way the system works, that those systems should not block our call. And so far, we haven't found a case where it was. Because when we do the calls, there's a log of what the response is. So we can look at, for every number that we call, we can say whether the person received that call or whether they didn't receive the call, or in the case of a robocall, we'd get a special message that says that the carrier didn't, the carrier rejected, I think is what the message is. So, moving forward, I would just encourage families that if anyone thinks they didn't get the call or is concerned about it, they should reach out to the school, let us know that they have a concern, and we could get back to them and say literally, that phone number received that call at that time, and go from there. Or say, oh no, you're right, we have a problem of one of these other natures, and we'll be able to fix it. But we think we've addressed it, and we're hoping that it'll be more effective next time.
Great.
Okay, a couple other issues I wanted to bring to your attention tonight. Friday is an early release day for professional development. I know it's always a bit of an inconvenience for some families that we have an early release day, but I just wanted to emphasize the importance of these days. This is one of only a couple opportunities we have to work with staff to do important trainings, to raise their capacity, to help us to do what we need to do. This Friday happens to be what we refer to as a choice PD day, which means that it's professional development, that there's a range of offerings and educators get to choose what they do, and they can base their choice on their own professional goals, so that they can work on the things that are important to them. And as Aidan mentioned, we're very proud that we have Jessica Minahan coming on Friday as part of our professional development. She's a national consultant and author. She'll be doing professional development around reducing anxiety, and we think that that'll be a great opportunity for our staff. And then there's just a full range of things. We do, I think, a pretty admirable job of trying to deliver professional development that people are asking for, and so this will be one of those important moments to do that. Another thing I wanted to notify the committee of this evening is that we've been working hard on an employee handbook. This is one of the things that this district has needed for as long as I've been at the central office, and one of the direct benefits of our decision to create the position of director of HR. And so it has been Singer's goal to create that much needed document, and we now have a draft which has been submitted to the lab for the HR council of the lab for review, which is an important next step. We hope to have that finalized this year and ready for employees for next year. So that's an important development that we're very excited about. I just wanted to remind everybody, and I think I'll talk about this in our next agenda item, that we have building tours coming up, one this Thursday evening, and then another one in February. These are important opportunities for the community to come in and see the things that we've been talking about in terms of the needs of the high school. I think that people will find it informative, and I hope that we have another good crowd. We were pleased by the number of people who came last time, and I hope that there's another group next time, and not just that everyone who was interested came the first time, but we'll find out on Thursday. And then finally, I know February will be here all too soon, and on that 15th for the building tour, that's part of a larger event, which we refer to as Blue Steam Ahead. And to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going to be going on that night, I'll turn it over to Ms. Regan.
So this is our first district-wide pre-K through 12 district event that's being hosted here. We're excited because the Attleboro High School will be showcasing all of their project-based learning in different parts of the building. We'll have magic shows from a science person that we've contracted with who actually supports presentations for our teachers as well. His passion for science and learning, it shines through, so I'm excited to share this information with our students as well. The middle school and high school will be having a band concert, joint band concert in the Bray Auditorium, and there'll be STEAM geared activities throughout the building. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And finally, we'll also be having the facilities tours throughout the night. We're looking forward to this event, and hopefully we'll be able to host it and it won't be a snow event. But there is a snow date. It's March 1st. So mark your calendars.
Please.
Thank you.
That concludes my report.
All right. Thank you all. MSBA project update. A few things to update you on. And then I think I will be looking for a motion on one item on this, but first, just for update, the schematic design was submitted to the MSBA for the January 2nd or 3rd deadline. On February 14th, we will be before the MSBA up in Boston, where we hope they will approve our schematic design and, in doing so, provide us with a proposed funding agreement. And then once that is done, that will have the final number that the state of the project, what the state is kicking in and what our share would be. And then that 120-day clock would be ticking to pass a measure to be able to fund our portion of the funding agreement with the state. The campaign on behalf of the debt exclusion vote continues to work towards, to advocate on behalf with events, the tours, and other events throughout the town and canvassing. One thing that we have talked about needing is a date for the election. As we start to get materials, put together, having a date is important. The February 14th is the day where we'll finally be able to have all the facts and be able to disseminate clear and accurate, complete detail to the public without any guessing or estimation. And so in discussion, the idea and the goal of the campaign, and in talking with SBC as well, is to have a election date of May 1st, which would give us a little under three months after the state approved us and we had all the facts, which is actually a similar timeline from when we were talking about the state approving in December and voting in March. So it's a similar campaign length. It would really give time for both sides, even opponents, to really discuss and debate the issues after we have all the information. And again, it allows the campaign, and if there's a campaign on the other side, to know what the date is and to really focus. So I think it's important that in the near future we have a proposed date for this. And so what I would be hoping is for a motion to endorse May 1st as the proposed date, and then I would submit that communication to both Council President Cooper and Mayor Haro, requesting that be the date that this election gets set.
What day of the week is that?
That's a Tuesday. Okay.
So moved?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Storrs?
I know things got pushed back, because I remember when we first started talking about this, we were talking about, we wanted to have about 3 months between when we would go before the MSBA and when we would bring it to a vote. Originally, we were supposed to go before them, what was it, December?
December.
And we were hoping for a March.
March 6th.
That would,
right.
So now, what was the reasoning why we pushed from December to February, you're saying?
Sure. Yep. So there's no meeting in January. So when we had to delay from the December, February was the next month available to us. And we still, up until a few weeks ago, were negotiating with the state on a few different items. The number of items that we're negotiating with them on, as far as reimbursement goes, was much larger. We've whittled it down to a couple that are still were up in the air. But so we just didn't have we couldn't submit the 3011 because we weren't clear enough as to what the state could potentially reimburse and what we would have to pay on our share. So in an effort to work that out, we decided not to submit in December. There is no submission in January, so February is the next.
And the May
First.
1st would give us a little less than 3 months, but close.
Close, yeah.
Makes sense to me. All right.
And that allows us, and then that's before we get into, the meat of budget season as well. Right. Mrs. Sawyer?
Would we not contemplate doing it at the same time as they're voting for the new state rep?
Well, we found out today that the state rep election is going to be March 4th, I believe. I'm sorry, March 6th, April 6th. Primary March 6th, general election April 4th for the state rep. March 6th is too early, to get all the votes in place to do it, and April 4th wouldn't give us enough time really for a strong campaign. I do think, and this was in a column that Bill Gavea had in the paper, this is the largest project the city's ever undertaken. It is a major ask of the community. I think it makes sense to allow both sides to have some time to present their case where there are not other issues clouding the discussion, and so that we can, fully discuss it with the full attention of the community. Mr. Quinn?
I think you raise a really interesting point, and it's an exciting time for the district to bring in a building that's going to revitalize the community and provide a high-quality education for our students to help them thrive and be successful and be able to, be contributing members of society, but also, join in the shared prosperity of America. And I think the good news is, according to an MSBA release, I think as of 2012, cities and towns had passed these types of bills on the first try. I think 96% of the time, out of like 130 at the time, 125 or so had passed, no problem. But I've also been talking to MASC, our advisory body, who said, that the stakes are high. The rep said that there would be at least a 2-year waiting period in order to jump back into the program. It's not like the old process where you could just keep applying. The funding is limited. And that, the needier you are, like we are, the higher priority we are, but they do take into account a failed vote. And I think their recommendation to us, and I'd like to make this recommendation, Mr. Withers, is that if we could have somebody from MSBA, Jack McCarthy was the gentleman that was recommended, come down and to explain that, the MSBA does not fund Taj Mahal schools. They give you what you need, exactly what you need, based on your education plan and your enrollment. And also, just to hear from somebody who doesn't have direct skin in the game, who's making these value judgments, I think it would be worthwhile for members of the community to hear from an impartial voice. Just that we're on the right track, that what we're doing is both fiscally and educationally responsible, and that, we put ourselves in a position to have significant cost escalators if we choose to delay.
Yeah, I think it's worth coordinating with the campaign committee and also the SBC to see if they can set something up with someone from the MSBA to come down and talk about the process, and also, some of the misconceptions about what they're willing to fund and what they, as far as the project. I think that's a good idea. Mr. Storrs?
So we're not going to have the finalized information, just to kind of recap this, until the 14th of February.
Correct.
So if we were to try to put this along with the state rep, we're talking a month and a half later. And that does not seem to me to be enough time to truly vet this and to present this appropriately so that all sides are properly educated on this issue. That extra month between April to May, to me, seems important. So this makes sense.
Mr. Gaddis?
Thank you, sir. Going back to Mr. Quinn's point about having someone from the MSBA come to town, another recommendation that I had heard along the same lines is having someone from the Department of Revenue come down to discuss the difference between a Proposition 2.5 override and a debt exclusion, because there is a lot of confusion there. There are significant differences that I think if people are thinking this is a full 2.5 override, and not understanding the difference between the two, that may impact how they would vote on this project. So I think that's something that would be a good either combination event or something happening around the same time that I think would be good for community members to come out and hear.
Mr. Quinn?
Yeah, and the Department of Revenue piece kind of sparked another component of just this whole process that I think is worth reiterating, is that the MSBA takes into account our demographics when they put together our funding formula. So whatever our base is going to be reflective of, our poverty rate, our property value, and the city income. And, I think it's realistic that there are some people in our community that are hurting, and we need to find ways to make this project a reality for all members of our community. But I also see this building as kind of a weapon against poverty. So how can we not only use this to prevent the next generation from falling into the same kind of traps, but also, as if we're thinking big as the center of a community united around education, how might this building be a center of, after-school job training or different resources, not to take from BCC and the wonderful work you do over there. We don't want to cut into that. But how do we make it more accessible so that there's a shared prosperity in this community? So that way, that the wealth that the city still has can be shared by all.
Anyone else? Okay, so we have a motion that was seconded endorsing a proposed date of May 1st for the election and authorizing me to write Council President Cooper and Mayor Haro, informing them of that endorsement and requesting that they take up that date. So I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mrs. Sawyer?
No.
All right, motion passes. One other thing on the MSBA update, and Mr. Quinn kind of refreshed my memory. I should have mentioned this before in talking about reimbursement rates. And the MSBA actually recently increased our reimbursement rate approximately 1.5%, which will lead to about $3 million in round numbers going to the state side of the ledger for reimbursement as opposed to the city side. So that was certainly good news that we've got in the past couple of weeks. So thank you for hitting on that, because that was something I meant to mention. Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to give a little bit more detail, Mr. Sawyer mentioned the tour that's happening at the high school this Thursday night. So that is the first of a few upcoming events. So this Thursday, 6 p.m. in the mini auditorium. That does include a tour of the building and question and answer session and a brief presentation before the tour. Also this Friday at the Masons Lodge right next to the YMCA on North Main Street at 7 p.m. We will be doing public presentation. And then Saturday, January 20th at noon at the Attleboro Public Library. Those are the next upcoming ones. We do have, we did schedule these anticipating an early March vote. So knowing that the vote will be later, we'll be adding some additional presentations. I have been in touch with Mr. Furtado, Mr. Parento, and Principal Rooney about adding tours on the weekends. That is a concern that we have heard. And I know the City Council has heard those concerns as well, that some folks can't get here on the weeknights, so they do want an opportunity to tour the building on the weekends. So we are going to try to schedule at least one sometime, hopefully in March. And so we're just checking the building availability for that now. So more information to come on those. But just wanted to give those next few presentations a little bit more detail.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Mrs. Torres?
I'm hoping you can speak to this. So as far as the process and timeline associated, when it comes to the question that will ultimately be on the ballot, can you speak to that? What is the process? What is the, as far as the forming of the wording? Because as you can imagine, that's very important to this process.
Sure. So my understanding is that the wording is provided by the city solicitor, correct, and sent down to the city council to approve. It'll be well, the city council has to approve too. They have to approve the debt exclusion vote. They also have to approve the loan authorization. So they have to approve the actual amount that we would be borrowing, and then the vote itself that the citizens or voters would make would be to authorize a debt exclusion to pay for X amount of dollars for a new Attleboro High School, and I believe it also has to specify the amount of years that it would be for as well. So it specifies the amount, the length, and the purpose, because those are the three things that can't change with the debt exclusion. The difference between an override.
Do we know if the school building committee will be privy to that question before it gets forward for a vote?
Before it gets forwarded to
City council.
the city council?
Just to make sure that it's vetted properly is what I'm looking at.
It's a good question. I can look into that. Do you have anything to add on the process or to miss anything?
No.
There'll be language that's required in the vote
Yeah.
by MSBA.
I was going to say, I think the solicitor writes it, but I think it's with strong encouragement from some state agencies as to how it should be phrased.
Right.
So.
I'm pretty sure there's a boilerplate.
Any other questions? Comments? Anything else the administrators wanted to add? All right, so that concludes the MSBA update, and I will get that communication off to Mayor Haro and Council President Cooper tomorrow. Next on the agenda is subcommittee assignments. Last time I think I sent these out by email, but given that there is a subcommittee meeting beginning this week, I thought I would just give them out tonight. So just run through them real quick. If anyone has any questions, they can email me or contact me after. Policy subcommittee, will be Mrs. Scales, Mr. Quinn, Mr. Storrs, and Mrs. Johnson. Infrastructure will be Mr. Geddes, Mr. Storrs, Mr. Larson, and Mrs. Johnson. Teaching and learning will be Mr. Quinn, Mr. Geddes, Mrs. Sawyer, and for a limited time, Mrs. Scales. Mrs. Scales will be replaced when we have a new member replacing Mr. Tyler. And budget and finance will be Mr. Larson, Mrs. Scales, Mrs. Sawyer, and for a limited time, Mr. Quinn, who will be replaced when we have a new member to replace Mr. Tyler. Mr. Geddes will be our SBC rep, replacing Mr. Tyler. And I think that is it. So if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me on those. Okay? Minutes, we have minutes to approve from our December 11th, 2017 and January 2nd, 2018 meetings. The minutes were circulated to you all among your packets, or in your packets. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? Changes, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Consent agenda. Motion to approve a donation in the amount of $500 from the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation to the Robotics Club at Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve a donation in the amount of $500 from the Apgar family to Hill Roberts Gifts donation line for Hill Roberts School Library.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve a donation in the amount of $100 from the Bank of America Charitable Foundation to the Hill Roberts Gift donation line.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Pursuant to 2016 and 17 Life Touch Contract subsection 12, motion to approve $18,156.85 to directly benefit the students on the schools, broken down in the memorandum submitted to you dated December 27th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation from an anonymous donor in the amount of $50 to be used to help pay off one or several school lunch debts for a family in need at Thatcher Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation from an anonymous donor in the amount of $150 to be applied to student unpaid meal accounts and/or to other student accounts as deemed appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation from the Feinstein Foundation to the Brennan Gifts donation line. Do we have an amount for that, Ms. Nelson? No.
I'm sorry, I didn't put it on there. I want to say it's $1,000, but I'm not positive.
Why don't we hold it off to the next meeting? All right. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $12,185.18 from the Wamsutta PTO to be used for the purchase of Chrome carts at Wamsutta Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I'd just say job well done to another one of our PTOs. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes, and that concludes our consent agenda. Moving on to our subcommittee reports. Mrs. Scales, policy?
Just one item, just to make note that the following policies and exhibits are being removed from the table and will go into immediate effect. GBGF, Family and Medical Leave, GCBA, Employee Salary Schedules, GCBC, Staff Supplementary Plans, GCBD, Staff Fringe Benefits, GCBDE1, Employment Agreement Yearly, GCBDE2, Employment Agreement Multi-Year, GCE, Professional Staff Recruiting, Posting of Vacancies, GCF, Professional Staff Hiring, GCG, Substitute Employment, GCGE1, Substitute Pay Rate, GCJ, Professional Teaching Status, GCQF, Suspension and Dismissal of Professional Staff Members, GDD, Staff Vacation and Holidays, GDQD, Suspension and Dismissal of Support Staff Members, IHBG, Homeschooling, IHBG E1 Homeschooling Application Procedure, IHBG E2 application for homeschooling, and JICFB anti-bullying. And our next meeting is a couple weeks.
Posted.
Yeah,
It's on the
posted
website.
somewhere.
Thank you, Mrs. Scales. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the school committee at open forum? All right, seeing nobody, I will close open forum. And finally, we'll go into executive session. The Attleboro School Committee will convene an executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Sections 21A2 and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with union personnel and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, respectively, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. The school committee will not reconvene in open session. Do you have a motion?
Second.
Mrs. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
All right, let's take 2 minutes.